Part 1. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from across the stars. Creatures of every shape and size gathered to discuss the future of their expanding empire. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as pure energy contained in special suits. They had ruled the known galaxy for thousands of years, and their power seemed endless. Admiral Zekthor stood at the center of the hall. He was of Raxian, tall and covered in dark purple armor-like skin. His 4 eyes scanned the room as he prepared to speak about his newest plan. The other council members waited to hear what he had to say. "Honored members," Zekthor began, his voice deep and commanding. "I come before you today to discuss the expansion into Sector 773. This region contains 40 habitable planets, rich mineral deposits, and perfect conditions for our colonies." A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew about Sector 773. It was the Forbidden Zone, the area that no one dared to enter. For generations, it had been marked as dangerous territory. Commander Yilna, a being made of living crystal, spoke up. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a breeze. "Admiral, that sector is protected by ancient law. The old records warn us to stay away from that region. They speak of a dangerous species that once lived there." Zekthor laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "You speak of the human myth. Yes, I have read the old stories. Tales of aggressive bipedal creatures from a death world called Earth. Stories say they were unstoppable warriors who refused to surrender. But these are just stories, Commander. Nothing more than legends told to frighten young ones." "The records are quite detailed," said another council member, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Polmix. "They describe battles, coordinates, even specific encounters with these humans." "Records from 10,000 cycles ago," Zekthor replied. "Our scouts have surveyed that entire sector. There are no advanced civilizations, no energy signatures, no communications, no defense grids. If humans ever existed, they are long gone now. Most likely they destroyed themselves, as all violent species eventually do." The Admiral activated a holographic display. It showed the sector in question, with dozens of planets highlighted in blue. "Look at these worlds. Resources beyond measure. And they sit empty, unclaimed, waiting for us. We allow fear of ancient ghosts to prevent our progress." In the back of the hall, an old keeper of records named Pelkan listened carefully. He was responsible for maintaining the Forbidden Archives, the collection of documents too disturbing for public access. He had spent his long life reading every account, every report, every warning about the humans. Pelkan remembered one report in particular. It described the last expedition into human territory, over 10,000 years ago. A fleet of 500 ships had entered their space, seeking to establish trade relations. Only one ship returned. The survivors spoke of weapons that defied understanding, of tactics that seemed almost magical, of a species that fought with such intensity that death itself seemed to fear them. But Pelkan said nothing. He had learned long ago that some people would only believe what they could see with their own eyes. Words and warnings meant nothing to those filled with confidence and greed. "I propose we send an invasion fleet," Zekthor continued. 300 warships backed by support vessels from 5 different species. We will establish military control first, then begin colonization. Any primitive life we encounter will be given the choice to submit or be removed. Several council members nodded in agreement. The promise of new territory and resources was too tempting to resist. Only a few looked uncertain, remembering the old warnings. "What if the legends are true?" asked a small delegate from the Kretha species. "What if humans still exist in that sector?" Zekthor's mandibles clicked together in amusement. "Then they will learn what happens when primitive species encounter the might of the Galactic Council. Our technology is advanced beyond measure. Our fleets are unstoppable. Even if humans exist, they would be no match for our combined power." The vote was called. One by one, the delegates raised their agreement. The invasion was approved. 300 warships would be assembled and sent to Sector 773 within the month. As the council members filed out of the hall, celebrating their decision, Pelkan returned to his archives. He walked through the dark corridors filled with ancient data crystals and preserved documents. Finally, he reached the oldest section, where the most dangerous knowledge was kept. He pulled out a specific file, one he had read many times before. It contained the last transmission from the expedition that had encountered humans. The message was brief but terrifying. It read, "They do not stop. They do not fear. They adapt to everything we throw at them, requesting immediate evacuation. If anyone receives this message, mark this sector as forbidden. Never return to human space. They are unlike anything we have ever encountered. Pelkan closed the file and returned it to its place. He wondered how many Vraxian soldiers would return from this expedition. He suspected the number would be far fewer than 300 ships. Meanwhile, Admiral Zekthor stood on the observation deck of his flagship, looking out at the stars. His crew was already preparing for the journey. Ships were being loaded with weapons, supplies, and troops. The excitement among his soldiers was clear. They saw this as an easy victory, a chance for glory and advancement. Admiral, his second-in-command approached. The fleet will be ready to depart in 20 days. All systems are being checked and prepared. Excellent, Zekthor replied. Make sure every ship is equipped with surveying equipment. Once we secure the sector, I want immediate reports on the most valuable planets. We will make history with this conquest. Do you truly believe the human stories are false? The second-in-command asked quietly. Zekthor turned to face him. I believe in what I can see and measure. Our sensors show no advanced civilization in that sector. Therefore, either humans never existed or they are extinct. Either way, those worlds will soon belong to the Vraxian Empire. The preparations continued. Across multiple worlds, soldiers boarded ships. Weapons were tested and loaded. Battle plans were reviewed. Everyone in the fleet believed they were about to claim empty territory, that this would be a simple occupation mission. None of them knew that in the depths of space, in the sector they were about to invade, sensors had already detected their preparations. Silent watchers had noted the gathering fleet, had analyzed their ships and weapons, had calculated their intentions, and those watchers were preparing a response that would shake the entire galaxy. Part 2. The colony of New Haven existed on the outer edge of human territory. It was a small settlement, home to about 50,000 people who had chosen a quiet life away from the crowded inner worlds. Most of them worked in the mining facilities, extracting valuable minerals from the planet's rich deposits. Others ran farms, operated the small spaceport, or maintained the colony's basic infrastructure. Jake Morrison had called New Haven home for the past 5 years. Before that, he had spent 20 years in the Terran Defense Forces, rising to the rank of captain before retiring. He was 42 years old now, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. The peaceful life suited him. He enjoyed his morning coffee while watching the sunrise over the red mountains that surrounded the colony. This particular morning started like any other. Jake walked into the control tower of the spaceport, carrying his usual cup of coffee. The tower was a modest building, 3 stories tall with windows overlooking the landing pads. Only a handful of people worked there, managing the occasional cargo ship that came to pick up ore shipments. Claire Bennett sat at the main communications console. She was 26 years old, fresh out of technical school, and had moved to New Haven seeking adventure. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail as she monitored the various screens in front of her. Morning, Captain, she said cheerfully. Quiet night. Only 2 automated cargo drones came through. Jake nodded and settled into his chair. Good, with any luck, it'll be a quiet day too. I could use boring right about now. He had barely finished speaking when Claire's console began beeping rapidly. Her smile faded as she looked at the readings. Captain, I'm picking up something. Multiple signatures entering the system. Jake set down his coffee and moved to her station. How many? Claire's fingers moved across her keyboard, pulling up more detailed information. 30 contacts. No, wait. The number keeps growing. 50 now.
Captain, these signatures are massive.
These aren't cargo ships. Are they broadcasting identification codes? Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer. Negative. No standard approach protocols. No communication at all. They're just entering our system in formation. Claire looked up at him and he could see the concern in her eyes. Captain, I count over 300 ships now. This is a military fleet. Jake felt his old instincts wake up. His peaceful retirement was apparently over. Sound the colony alert. Get every civilian into the underground shelters immediately. Then send an emergency transmission to Earth Defense Command. Maximum priority. Yes, sir. Claire's training took over as she began executing his orders. Alarms began blaring throughout the colony. People stopped what they were doing and began moving toward the designated shelter points. They had practiced this drill before, though most had assumed it would never be needed. Parents grabbed their children. Workers abandoned their posts. Within minutes, thousands of people were flowing into the reinforced underground bunkers that had been built when the colony was first established. Jake activated the colony-wide communication system. His voice echoed from speakers throughout New Haven. "This is Captain Morrison. This is not a drill. We have an unidentified fleet entering our system. All civilians proceed to shelters immediately. All personnel with military experience report to your designated defense stations. This is a code red situation." Across the colony, people responded. Most of the civilians continued to the shelters, but dozens of men and women changed direction. They headed instead to the small armory, to the defense positions scattered around the settlement, to the handful of military assets the colony possessed. New Haven was a mining colony, but it was also a human colony. And humans, even peaceful ones, believed in being prepared. The colony had 4 plasma cannon emplacements, automated turret systems, and 1 old Corvette-class warship that Jake had personally restored over the years. It was not much compared to 300 enemy ships, but it would have to be enough. Lieutenant Scott Murphy was one of the first to reach the weapon stations. He normally ran the water reclamation facility, but he had served 10 years in the Terran Marines before retiring. He was a stocky man with red hair and a thick beard. As he climbed into the control seat of plasma cannon number 3, his hands moved with practiced ease over the controls. "Cannon 3 ready," he reported over the radio. "Good to be back in the fight." Similar reports came from the other positions. Helen Price, a grandmother who ran the colony's school, manned Cannon 1. Greg Sullivan, who operated a mining excavator, took position 2. Victoria Lang, the colony doctor, activated Cannon 4. All of them were veterans. All of them remembered their training. Jake made his way to the small hangar where his Corvette was stored. The ship was called the Vigilant, a name he had chosen carefully. It was 70 meters long, armed with missiles and a single heavy railgun. Against 300 warships, it would be like a mouse fighting elephants. But Jake had learned long ago that size was not everything in combat. He climbed into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence. The engines hummed to life. Weapon systems activated, shields powered up. The ship was old but well maintained. Jake had made sure of that. "Control, this is Vigilant. Preparing for launch." "Acknowledged, Vigilant," Claire's voice came back. "Captain, the alien fleet has sent us a message." "Translating now." Jake waited as the computer processed the alien language. Finally, the translation appeared on his screen. It was simple and direct. "Surrender immediately. Resistance will result in total destruction. You have 1 hour to comply." Jake opened a channel to all defense positions. "Everyone hear that? They're giving us an hour. Use that time to get ready. Check your weapons. Review your targeting protocols. And remember your training. We might be outnumbered, but we're not outmatched." He switched to the external communication system and broadcast his response toward the alien fleet. His voice was calm and steady. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of New Haven Colony, representing the Terran Federation. You have entered our territory without permission. You have threatened our civilians. Leave our system immediately or face the consequences." In orbit above, Admiral Zekthor listened to the transmission with amusement. His 4 eyes gleamed as he turned to his bridge crew. "The primitive actually threatens us. How entertaining. Tactical officer, fire a warning shot. Show them what they face." "Target locked on an unpopulated area near their settlement," the tactical officer reported. "Fire." A beam of bright blue energy lanced down from one of the Vraxian destroyers. It struck a hillside 2 kilometers from New Haven. The explosion was massive, sending rock and dirt hundreds of meters into the air. The mushroom cloud could be seen from across the colony. Jake watched the explosion through his cockpit window. He felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "All units, they just fired first. Rules of engagement are now unrestricted. Weapons free. Show these aliens why you don't start fights with humans." The Vraxian fleet began to move closer, confident in their overwhelming advantage. Admiral Zekthor expected to see surrender signals any moment. Instead, his tactical display suddenly lit up with alarm indicators. "Admiral, the surface installations are powering up weapons. Destroy them," Zekthor ordered. But before his ships could fire, the first human shots rang out. 4 plasma bolts shot up from the surface, moving faster than Zekthor had thought possible. They struck 4 different ships simultaneously. The bolts punched through shields as if they were not there. hitting critical systems with impossible accuracy. Shields down on destroyers 7, 15, 23, and 31, his tactical officer shouted in alarm. How did they penetrate our shields? Zekthor demanded. Unknown, Admiral. Their weapons are using a frequency we've never encountered. On the surface, Scott Murphy grinned as his targeting computer confirmed the hit. Direct hit. Target neutralized. Moving to next contact. The Battle of New Haven had begun. Part 3. The alien fleet had expected an easy victory. They had come prepared to face primitive weapons and disorganized resistance. What they encountered instead was something that would haunt their military records for generations to come. Jake Morrison guided the Vigilant through the atmosphere, climbing toward orbit where the alien ships waited. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, decades of training taking over. The Corvette was small and fast, designed for exactly this kind of situation. Claire, I need targeting data on the command ships, he said into his radio. Prioritize the largest vessels. Back in the control tower, Claire worked frantically at her console. She had already hacked into the alien communication network, something that had surprised her with its simplicity. The alien encryption was complex by their standards, but humans had been breaking codes for centuries. Their quantum computers made short work of it. Captain, I'm in their system, she reported. I can see their entire fleet layout. Sending you targeting priorities now. Also, I can feed them false information if you want. Do it, Jake replied. Make them think we have more ships than we do. Spread them out, keep them confused. On the ground, the 4 plasma cannons continued their devastating work. Helen Price, the schoolteacher, had already disabled 3 enemy destroyers. Her years in the military had been spent as a weapons specialist, and those skills had not faded. She tracked her next target with cold precision. Targeting carrier vessel, she announced. These look like they're fighter deployment ships. Taking it out. Her plasma bolt streaked into space, covering the distance in seconds. It hit the carrier's hangar bay, causing a chain reaction of explosions. Secondary blasts rippled through the ship as stored fuel and ammunition ignited. The carrier broke apart, scattering debris across the orbital space. Admiral Zekthor watched in growing horror as his tactical display showed more and more ships taking damage. How is this possible? They're just one small colony. Where are all these ships coming from? His tactical officer's voice shook. Admiral, I'm reading multiple false signatures. They're spoofing our sensors. I cannot determine how many actual targets we face. Then send fighters to scout the area. Get me visual confirmation. Dozens of small fighter craft launched from the remaining carriers, spreading out to search for the human ships. What they found instead were automated defense drones, hidden among the orbital debris and inactive satellites around the planet. The drones activated as the fighters approached, their weapons systems coming online. The drones were simple machines not much bigger than a car, but they were fast, heavily armed, and controlled by advanced artificial intelligence. They swarmed the alien fighters like angry hornets, firing missiles and energy weapons. The alien pilots, trained for traditional fleet combat, found themselves overwhelmed by the aggressive tactics. Jake watched the fighter battle on his displays while engaging the larger ships. His railgun fired, sending a solid slug of metal at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile hit a Vraxian cruiser, punching completely through its armor and out the other side. The ship listed to one side, atmosphere venting from the massive hole. One down, Jake muttered. A few hundred more to go, but he was not alone. Hidden among the asteroid belt at the system's edge, 3 more human ships had been waiting. They were mining vessels, converted for combat by adding weapon pods and better engines. They were not military ships, but their crews were determined. Captain Ray Foster commanded one of these converted miners. He had spent 15 years in the Terran Navy before becoming a civilian miner. His ship, the Determined, moved out from behind an asteroid and opened fire on the alien fleet's flank. This is the Determined joining the fight, he broadcast. Sorry, we're late to the party. His weapons were mining lasers meant for cutting through rock. Against ship armor, they were devastatingly effective. The focused beam sliced through a destroyer's engine section, causing the ship to explode. The aliens were now facing attacks from multiple directions. Their formation, designed for organized fleet combat, began to break apart as individual ships tried to respond to threats from all sides. What the Galactic Council forces did not understand was that humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. Every tactic, every strategy, every dirty trick of warfare had been developed, tested, and refined through thousands of years of conflict. Humans knew how to fight when outnumbered. They knew how to use terrain, how to strike at weak points, how to create chaos. Scott Murphy fired his plasma cannon again, this time targeting the shield generators on a battleship. Without shields, the ship became vulnerable to the automated turrets scattered around New Haven. Dozens of smaller weapons opened fire simultaneously, peppering the battleship with explosions. "They know our ship designs," Sekthor's science officer reported. "They're targeting our shield generators, our engine cores, our weapon systems. They know exactly where to hit us." What the aliens did not know was that humanity had been watching them for decades. When the Galactic Council first appeared on the edge of human space, the Terran Federation had made a decision. Instead of announcing themselves, they observed. They studied every ship class, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine. They prepared for the day when contact might turn hostile. That preparation was now saving lives. Victoria Lang, the colony doctor, had already destroyed 2 enemy ships from her plasma cannon position. She was a calm woman, methodical and precise. Those qualities made her an excellent doctor and an excellent gunner. She selected her targets carefully, focusing on ships that were getting too close to the colony. "Cannon 4 to all positions," she broadcast. "Focus fire on grid section 7. They're trying to establish a bombardment formation." The other gunners adjusted their targeting. 4 plasma bolts hit the same area of space within seconds of each other, destroying or disabling 5 enemy ships that had been moving into position. Jake's corvette danced through space, dodging incoming fire with movements that seemed impossible. The alien gunners were not used to targets that could move so quickly and unpredictably. Human ships were built to withstand high-gravity maneuvers, allowing them to change direction in ways that would tear apart most Galactic Council vessels. "Claire, how are we doing on ammunition?" Jake asked. "Plasma cannons are at 60%, missiles at 40%. But Captain, I'm picking up something new. The aliens are pulling back." Indeed, Admiral Sekthor had ordered a tactical retreat. His fleet was in chaos, communications disrupted, ships damaged or destroyed. In just a few hours of combat, he had lost nearly 50 vessels. This was supposed to be an easy occupation, not a real battle. "Pull all forces back to holding position at the system's edge," he ordered. "We need to reassess the situation." As the alien ships began to withdraw, Jake allowed himself a moment to breathe. "All positions cease fire." "Let them go." "Claire, get me a damage report." 4 minor injuries among our ground forces. No fatalities. The Vigilant took some hits, but nothing critical. The converted mining ships report moderate damage. "Captain, we did it. We drove them off." Jake knew better than to celebrate. This is just the first round. They'll regroup and come back with a better plan. Get me a count on our remaining ammunition, and call for volunteers to repair the damaged systems. We need to be ready for round 2. As the sun set on New Haven, the colonists emerged from their shelters to see the evidence of battle overhead. Burning wreckage from destroyed alien ships created shooting stars across the evening sky. The people cheered, but Jake Morrison stood quiet, knowing that the real fight was yet to come. In orbit, Admiral Sekthor stared at his casualty reports with disbelief. 50 ships destroyed or crippled by a mining colony. His confidence was shattered, replaced by something he had never felt before in his long military career. He was afraid. Part 4. The emergency transmission from New Haven traveled through space at faster than light speed, crossing the vast distance to Earth in a matter of hours. When it arrived at Earth Defense Command, the response was immediate and decisive. Admiral Henry Carter sat in his office deep beneath the city of Geneva when the alert came through. He was 60 years old, with gray hair cut military short and cold blue eyes that had witnessed decades of conflict. He had commanded forces during the Unification Wars, when Earth's nations finally came together under one banner. He had led the response to the Mars insurgency. He was a man who understood war and all its costs. "Sir, Priority 1 transmission from New Haven Colony," his aide announced, entering the office quickly. "They're under attack by an alien fleet." Henry was on his feet immediately. "Sound General Quarters. I want all department heads in the war room in 5 minutes, and get me a direct line to the civilian government." The war room filled rapidly with officers and analysts. Holographic displays showed the tactical situation at New Haven, updated in real time by the data stream from the colony. Henry studied the information carefully, his expression growing darker. 300 ships, he said quietly. They sent 300 warships to attack a mining colony. This is not a border dispute. This is attempted genocide. Colonel Lisa Grant, his chief of staff, stood beside him. She was 45, a veteran of numerous campaigns and one of the finest strategic minds in the Terran military. Sir, the political division is requesting we pursue diplomatic channels before escalating. Henry's jaw tightened. They fired first, Lisa. They attacked civilians. The time for diplomacy ended the moment they pulled the trigger. Prepare mobilization orders for the 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets. I want every available carrier group ready to deploy within 1 week. That's nearly 1,000 ships, sir, Lisa said. Are you sure? The aliens came to New Haven with overwhelming force because they expected easy prey. We're going to teach them what happens when you threaten humanity. We're going to hit them so hard that every species in their Galactic Council will think twice before crossing into our territory again. Orders went out across human space. On military bases scattered across dozens of worlds, alarms sounded and personnel rushed to their posts. In orbital shipyards, construction crews began working around the clock. Reserve units received activation notices. The entire Terran Federation military machine began to wake up. But the response was not just military. In research facilities, scientists began unsealing weapons projects that had been mothballed years ago. Humanity had spent centuries developing military technology in isolation, creating weapons that other species had never imagined. Most of these weapons had never been used, locked away in the hope they would never be needed. Dr. Patricia Webb led the research division. She was a small woman with white hair and glasses, looking more like a kind grandmother than one of the most dangerous minds in human space. She stood in a secure vault looking at the sealed containers that held humanity's darkest secrets. Open Project 77, she ordered, and Project 12. If we're going to war with the Galactic Council, we need every advantage. Project 77 was a nanite weapon system, microscopic machines that could disassemble ships at the molecular level. Project 12 was even worse, a gravity weapon that could create miniature black holes. These were weapons that violated every treaty humans had made with themselves. But those treaties did not include alien species that attacked civilian colonies. At New Haven, Jake Morrison and his defenders worked to repair their damaged systems and prepare for the next assault. They knew the aliens would return, probably with reinforcements. But help was coming. The first human reinforcements arrived 3 days after the initial battle. A rapid response battalion, 300 Marines in full combat armor aboard 2 fast transport ships. They were led by Major Kevin Rhodes, a compact man with burn scars covering half his face, souvenirs from the Titan campaign. Jake met him at the landing pad as the Marines disembarked. Major Rhodes, welcome to New Haven. Kevin shook his hand firmly. Captain Morrison, it's an honor. Command sends their regards and their orders. We're here to dig in and make sure those aliens regret their decision. I understand you gave them a bloody nose already. We got lucky, Jake replied. They weren't expecting resistance. Next time they'll be ready for us. Then we'll just have to be ready for them, Kevin said with a grim smile. My people are trained for exactly this kind of defensive operation. Show me your positions and let's get to work. The Marines spread throughout the colony, reinforcing defensive positions and setting up new ones. They brought with them heavy weapons, advanced sensors, and most importantly, experience. These were professional soldiers, trained to fight against any threat. Claire Bennett worked with the Marine communications specialists to improve their sensor network. We need to see them coming from farther out, she explained. Give us more time to prepare. One of the Marines, a tech specialist named Gary Lynn, studied her setup with approval. You've done good work with what you had, but we brought some toys that will really help. How do you feel about putting up a sensor satellite network? I feel great about it, Claire replied. Let's get started. Meanwhile, Admiral Zekthor was dealing with his own problems. He had sent a report to the Galactic Council, detailing his losses and requesting additional forces. The response had been skeptical. You lost 50 ships to a mining colony? The council representative had asked. How is this possible? These humans are unlike any species we have encountered, Zekthor had replied. They fight with a coordination and ferocity that our tactical simulations never predicted. I am requesting an additional 500 ships. The council had debated for hours before finally approving the request. They still did not fully believe in the human threat, but they could not ignore the casualty reports. 500 additional warships were authorized and began the journey to join Zekthor's fleet. But the humans were not idle either. Admiral Henry Carter's fleets were moving into position, staying just outside the system where New Haven sat, waiting for the right moment to strike. "We let the aliens make the first move in the second battle," Henry explained to his staff. "Let them commit their forces. Then we hit them from an unexpected direction with everything we have." The Third Fleet consisted of 200 heavy warships, carriers, and support vessels. The Seventh Fleet had 300 ships, including experimental vessels equipped with the new weapon systems. The Ninth Fleet added another 400 ships, a mix of destroyers, frigates, and assault carriers. Together, they represented the largest military force humanity had assembled since the Unification Wars. But it was not just about numbers. Human ships were designed differently than those of the Galactic Council. They were built to survive in high-gravity environments, to withstand radiation and extreme temperatures. Their armor was denser, their weapons more powerful, their engines more efficient. Humans came from a death world, and they built their tools accordingly. Captain Jake Morrison received word of the approaching human fleets and felt a mixture of relief and concern. Relief that help was coming, concern about what it meant for the future. This was humanity's first major conflict with an alien species. How it ended would determine the relationship between humans and the rest of the galaxy for generations to come. "Captain, sensors are picking up activity at the system's edge," Claire reported. "The alien fleet is being reinforced. Count is now over 800 ships." Jake nodded slowly. "Here we go again. Sound the alert. Get everyone to their positions. And Claire, send a message to Admiral Carter. Tell him the second round is about to start." In his command center on the battleship Victory, Henry Carter received the message and smiled coldly. "Good, all fleets move to attack positions. It's time to introduce the Galactic Council to the real capabilities of the Terran Federation." Part 5, the Second Battle of New Haven, began at dawn. Admiral Zekthor's reinforced fleet entered the system with over 800 ships, confident that this time they would crush the human resistance. They had learned from their first encounter and came prepared with better tactics and more firepower. What they did not know was that 3 human battle fleets waited in the darkness beyond the system's edge, invisible to their sensors, ready to spring a trap that would change galactic history forever. Jake Morrison stood in the control tower, watching the alien fleet appear on his screens. The sheer number of ships was intimidating, but he had faced worse odds before. Beside him, Major Kevin Rhodes checked his weapon and prepared for a ground assault. "They're really committed this time," Kevin observed. 800 ships for one colony. We should feel honored." "I'd rather feel bored," Jake replied. "But since that's not an option, let's give them another lesson." "Claire, are all positions ready?" "Affirmative, Captain." "Plasma cannons charged, turrets armed, drones deployed, Marines are in position. We're as ready as we'll ever be." Admiral Zekthor stood on his flagship's bridge studying the colony below. He had spent weeks analyzing the previous battle, understanding where his forces had failed. This time would be different. "All ships maintain formation discipline," he ordered. "Deploy shield overlapping pattern 7. Launch fighters in screening formation. Bombardment vessels. Begin targeting civilian shelters. If we destroy what they're protecting, they will have no reason to fight." It was a cruel strategy, but Zekthor had learned that humans were emotional creatures. They fought not just for territory, but for each other. Remove their families, and perhaps their soldiers would lose their will to resist. The first alien bombardment began, targeting the underground shelters where New Haven's civilians had taken refuge. Massive energy beams lanced down from orbit, meant to punch through meters of rock and steel. But the shelters had been reinforced with technology from the Marine Battalion. Advanced shield generators, brought from Earth specifically for this defense, absorbed the impacts. The beams dissipated against invisible barriers, leaving the people below unharmed. "Shelters are holding," Claire reported. "Their bombardment is ineffective." "Good," Jake said. "Now let's return the favor. All defensive positions open fire." The 4 plasma cannons unleashed their fury, but this time the aliens were ready. Their overlapping shields deflected most of the shots. A few hits got through, damaging ships but not destroying them. The aliens had learned and adapted. "They've adjusted their defenses," Scott Murphy reported from his cannon position. "We're not getting the penetration we had before." "Switch to alternating frequency patterns," Jake ordered. "Make them work to block us." The battle settled into a brutal exchange. The aliens pressed forward, accepting losses to close the distance. The human defenders fought back with everything they had, but it was clear they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Then Admiral Henry Carter decided it was time to even the odds. All fleets, jump in on my mark, he ordered from the Victory's bridge. Target priority, their command ships and carriers. I want their leadership blinded and their fighter support gone. Execute in 3, 2, 1 mark. Space itself seemed to tear open as 3 human battle fleets emerged from faster-than-light travel, appearing around the alien formation like avenging ghosts. 900 human warships, fresh, fully armed, and led by commanders who had studied the alien tactics carefully. Admiral Zekthor's tactical display suddenly exploded with red warning icons. Where did they come from? He shouted. How did they get past our sensors? Unknown, Admiral, his sensor officer replied, his voice shaking. They just appeared. Reading 900 new contacts. They're surrounding us. Henry Carter opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship in the system, human and alien alike. His voice was cold and clear. This is Admiral Henry Carter of the Terran Federation. You came to our territory with the intention of destroying our people. You fired on civilians. You declared war on humanity. Now you will learn what that means. The human fleet opened fire. What followed was a demonstration of military technology and tactical thinking that the Galactic Council had never encountered. Human ships moved with impossible speed and precision, their artificial intelligence systems coordinating attacks across hundreds of vessels simultaneously. Railguns fired solid projectiles at relativistic speeds, hitting with the force of nuclear weapons. Plasma lances cut through alien ships like knives through paper. Missile swarms, guided by quantum computers, found weaknesses in shields and exploited them, mercilessly. But the most terrifying weapons were the ones humanity had kept secret until now. Dr. Patricia Webb watched from a command station on Earth as her weapons were deployed for the first time in actual combat. The nanite clouds appeared as shimmering mists released from special containment missiles. When they touched an alien ship, the results were horrific. The microscopic machines went to work immediately, disassembling the ship's hull at the molecular level. Within minutes, a destroyer that had taken years to build simply fell apart, its atoms scattered into space. The alien crews did not even have time to evacuate. Project 77 is effective, Patricia reported clinically, though her stomach turned at the sight. Target vessel completely disassembled. Admiral Zekthor watched in horror as 3 of his battleships simply dissolved into clouds of debris. What kind of weapon is that? How do we defend against it? His science officer had no answer. The Galactic Council had never developed nanotechnology to this level. They had deemed it too dangerous, too unpredictable. Humans had no such hesitation. The gravity weapons were even worse. Special frigates moved into position and fired devices that created temporary gravitational anomalies. Ships caught in these fields were crushed by forces equivalent to being near a black hole. Metal compressed, shields collapsed, and entire vessels were reduced to spheres of condensed matter. Fall back, Zekthor ordered desperately. All ships retreat immediately. But the human fleet had positioned themselves perfectly. Every escape route was covered by multiple ships. The alien forces were trapped in a killing field with no way out. Jake Morrison watched the orbital battle from the surface, seeing human military power displayed in full for the first time. Part of him was awed by the sheer effectiveness of the attack. Another part was disturbed by the destructive capability on display. Remind me never to make Admiral Carter angry, Kevin Rhodes muttered beside him. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it finally ended, the alien fleet was shattered. Over 700 ships had been destroyed or crippled. The few survivors were allowed to flee, carrying with them the tale of what had happened. Admiral Zekthor was retrieved from his crippled flagship by a human search and rescue team. He was brought aboard the Victory, treated for his injuries, and escorted to Admiral Carter's office. Henry sat behind his desk, reviewing the casualty reports. Human losses had been minimal, less than 20 ships destroyed and perhaps 3,000 casualties. The aliens had lost nearly 100,000 personnel. Admiral Zekthor, Henry said as the alien was brought in. Please sit. Zekthor collapsed into the offered chair, his body broken and his spirit shattered. You were supposed to be extinct, a legend, a myth told to frighten younglings. We were never extinct, Henry replied. We were watching, learning, preparing. You made the mistake of believing your own propaganda. You thought being numerous made you powerful, but humans learned long ago that power comes from being willing to do whatever is necessary to protect our own. What happens now? Zekthor asked quietly. Will you destroy my people? Invade our worlds? Henry stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. No, we're not conquerors. We don't want your territory or your resources. But we will defend our space with absolute force. He turned back to face Zekthor. You're free to go. Take your surviving ships and return to your empire. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them that humanity exists, that we're powerful, and that we will not tolerate aggression against our people. The Galactic Council will not accept this, Zekthor said. They will see you as a threat. Then they can learn the same lesson you did, Henry replied coldly. Or they can choose to respect our boundaries and leave us in peace. The choice is theirs. Part 6. 3 months after the Battle of New Haven, the Galactic Council chambers on the capital world of Centrum were filled with unprecedented tension. Representatives from dozens of species crowded the ancient hall, all focused on one thing. The humans had formally requested an audience. The council had spent weeks debating how to respond to humanity's sudden appearance. Some advocated for immediate military action, arguing that any species capable of such destructive power must be contained. Others urged caution, pointing to the fate of Admiral Zekthor's fleet as evidence that humans were not to be taken lightly. In the end, diplomatic protocol won out. The council extended an invitation, though many members did so reluctantly. They prepared their chambers for the arrival of humanity's representative, unsure what to expect. Admiral Henry Carter walked through the council chambers with quiet confidence. He wore his dress uniform, crisp and perfect, with medals earned through decades of service. He carried no weapons and brought no guards. His presence alone was enough to make several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. The chamber was an impressive structure, built from crystal and rare metals, designed to showcase the power and majesty of the Galactic Council. It had stood for thousands of years, hosting representatives from hundreds of species, but it had never hosted humanity before. Henry stood at the central podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. He recognized several species from intelligence reports: the crystalline septarians, the insectoid Vraxians, the floating pulmix, and dozens of others. All of them watched him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Members of the Galactic Council, Henry began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I am Admiral Henry Carter, representing the Terran Federation. We are humanity, and we have come to establish formal diplomatic relations. A council member from the Septarian Alliance rose to speak. Her name was Kriltar, and she was considered one of the Council's most influential voices. Admiral Carter, your people have demonstrated considerable military capability, but you speak of diplomacy after destroying a fleet of our allies. How do we reconcile these actions? Henry's expression remained neutral. Your allies attacked a civilian colony without provocation. They fired on defenseless settlements. They attempted genocide. We responded with appropriate force to defend our people. If you see that as aggression, then we have very different definitions of the word. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates looked uncomfortable with this direct response. They were used to more diplomatic language, to careful negotiations and subtle meanings. Henry's bluntness was shocking to them. Commander Yilna, the same council member who had warned about humans during the initial invasion planning, spoke next. The ancient records spoke of your species, but we believed you had destroyed yourselves. How did you survive? And why have you hidden from us until now? We never hid, Henry replied. We simply chose not to announce ourselves. When our scouts first encountered the Galactic Council, we made a decision. We observed rather than revealed ourselves. We studied your species, your technology, your military capabilities. We wanted to understand what kind of neighbors you would be before making contact. You spied on us, another delegate accused. We gathered intelligence, Henry corrected, just as I suspect many of you have attempted to do with each other. The difference is we were better at it. We learned everything about you while remaining undetected. Every ship class, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine. That knowledge saved lives when your fleet attacked our colony. An elderly delegate named Pelkan rose slowly. Henry recognized him from reports as the keeper of the Forbidden Archives. Admiral Carter, I read the old records, the accounts from the first contact with humanity, thousands of years ago. They described your people as aggressive, dangerous, unwilling to accept defeat. Has your species changed? Henry considered the question carefully. We have evolved just as all species do. We are not the same humans who first reached for the stars, but we retain certain characteristics. We do not start conflicts, but we finish them. We value peace, but we prepare for war. We hope for cooperation, but we demand respect. These qualities have allowed us to survive on one of the harshest worlds in the galaxy. He activated a holographic display, showing a slowly rotating image of Earth. This is our home world. The gravity is 40% higher than most of your inhabited planets. The weather can kill unprepared individuals in minutes. Natural disasters regularly devastate entire regions. Diseases evolve rapidly, forcing our immune systems to constantly adapt. Predators hunt in packs with coordination that rivals sentient species. The display changed, showing images of human history. Wars, plagues, natural disasters, all the horrors that humanity had endured. We climbed to the top of our food chain through determination and adaptation. Every challenge made us stronger. Every setback taught us new lessons. We learned to work together because isolation meant death. We learned to innovate because stagnation meant extinction. You speak of hardship as if it were a virtue, Kriltar observed. It is not a virtue, Henry replied. It is simply reality. Humans are not inherently superior to any of your species, but we come from an environment that forced us to become something specific. Strong, resilient, adaptable, and when necessary, absolutely ruthless in defending what is ours. He deactivated the display and looked directly at the assembled council. I am here today to establish clear boundaries. These star systems are under Terran Federation protection. Another holographic display appeared, showing a large region of space. These territories are not open for colonization. They are not available for resource exploitation. They are not subject to Galactic Council authority. You claim a significant portion of space, another delegate protested. By what right? By the right of presence and capability, Henry answered. We inhabit these systems. We have the military power to defend them, and we have the political will to enforce our borders. If you believe those criteria are insufficient, you are welcome to test them. I would advise against it. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several delegates shouted protests. Others demanded that humanity be forced to accept council authority. The noise grew until the council chairman, an ancient being named Vortek, called for silence. Admiral Carter, Vortek said slowly, you speak boldly for a species we could potentially overwhelm through sheer numbers. We have hundreds of member species, thousands of worlds, millions of ships. How do you propose to stand against such force? Henry smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Chairman, you are making the same mistake Admiral Zekthor made. You believe numbers equal victory. But consider this. We destroyed 700 of your most advanced warships with minimal losses. We demonstrated weapons technology you have never encountered. And we did all of this while defending, not attacking. Imagine what we could do if we brought the full weight of human military power to bear in an offensive operation. He let that sink in before continuing, but it does not have to come to that. We do not seek conflict with the Galactic Council. We simply demand that you respect our sovereignty. In return, we are willing to engage in limited trade, share certain technologies, and maintain peaceful relations. The choice is yours, Pelkan stood again. Admiral, if we accept your terms, what guarantee do we have that humanity will not become aggressive in the future? What stops you from expanding into our territory? Our nature, Henry replied simply. Humans are not conquerors by choice. We fight when we must, but we prefer to build, to explore, to create. Give us space to grow naturally and we will be content. Try to contain us or threaten us and you will discover just how dangerous we can be. It is really quite simple. The council debated for hours after Henry finished speaking. Representatives argued back and forth about the appropriate response. Some wanted to call humanity's bluff, to mobilize a massive fleet and crush this upstart species. Others advocated for acceptance, pointing to the casualties already suffered. In the end, pragmatism won. The Galactic Council formally recognized the Terran Federation as an independent entity. They established diplomatic relations and drew official borders. They agreed to limited trade and technology exchange, and most importantly, they agreed to a non-aggression pact. The agreement was signed in the same chamber where Henry had spoken. As representatives from both sides placed their marks on the treaty, Everyone understood that this was a new era for the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a myth. They were a reality that could not be ignored. After the ceremony, Henry stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city of Centrum. Pelkan approached and stood beside him. "You handled yourself well in there," the old archivist said. "But I must ask, were you bluffing about humanity's military capabilities? Could you really stand against the full might of the Galactic Council?" Henry was quiet for a moment before answering. "That is a question I hope we never have to answer definitively. But I will tell you this. Humanity has survived ice ages, pandemics, world wars, and our own self-destructive tendencies. We have split atoms and touched other worlds. We have built weapons that could destroy planets and then chose to lock them away. We are capable of both great creation and terrible destruction.